been remarkably incompetent in office, who failed to address the Feeding Our Future fraud, with respect to which $250 million went out to a nonprofit that he knew to be fraudulent. And we have an attorney general who's been dishonest. He has consistently lied about his role in Feeding Our Future and lied about supporting defunding the police and being remarkably hostile to law enforcement. I will stand up for Minnesotans. I will fight for all Minnesotans.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. We will now start with our first questions. And Attorney General Keith Ellison, you won the opening flip. So the first question will go to you, but the same question will go to both of you. So you'll both get 75 seconds to start this. Keith Ellison, rank the top 3 responsibilities and priorities, top 3 of the office of Minnesota's Attorney General.
Well, as Attorney General, I've been the people's lawyer. The responsibilities that the office requires is, first of all, we represent the people of the state of Minnesota in all consumer actions. That means the opioid cases you've heard about. That means fraudulent conduct when it comes to either pools or whatever it is. If you're internet service provider, we stand for you there. Wage theft, we stand for you there. The second thing we do is we represent the state of Minnesota. Over 100 boards, commissions, and agencies. We represent the people of the state of Minnesota and all that. And then, of course, one of the very important duties we have is supporting our county attorneys. In Minnesota, crime is prosecuted locally. And prosecutors all across the state have turned to my office to help them with the most serious cases, murder, criminal sexual conduct. We have taken those cases. We've never turned down a serious case, and we have won 100% of those cases and have stood up with victims. Now, there's a lot of other duties that I could talk about, but I would say those are the 3 most important duties.
Jim Schultz.
At this current moment in Minnesota's history, during a period in which we're living through the greatest increase in violent crime in many decades, the top priority for the Attorney General of Minnesota has to be violent crime. There were 100 murders in Minneapolis last year, 650 carjackings, crime and violence bleeding out to the suburbs and the rest of the state. And we have an attorney general who's focused on anything but crime. He brags about prosecuting 50 folks over the past 4 years. That's like me bragging about running 5 miles over 4 years. There's been 750 carjackings alone in Minneapolis. To brag about prosecuting 50 cases is an extraordinary admission of failure. We need to aggressively prosecute crime and support law enforcement. Alongside that, we'll continue to do things like consumer protection, ensuring that businesses who commit wrongdoing in our state are held accountable. We absolutely will do that. And finally, we'll ensure that nonprofits in our state, nonprofits like Feeding Our Future, who defrauded governments by over $250 million, and Keith Ellison was at the center of that. He advised the Department of Education during a period in which extraordinary sums were stolen from taxpayers. He failed to stop that money from going out, despite the fact that he knew that Feeding Our Future was fraudulent. That's reckless and wrong.
All right, to both of you now, the same question. Both of you have pledged to use the Attorney General's office to fight crime, as we've been talking about. How specifically would you do things differently, Jim, when it comes to prosecuting crime? And Keith Ellison will ask you that question as well after Jim's response.
Three key points here. Number one, I'll support county attorneys around the state. I've spoken with county attorneys, county sheriffs. I've endorsed by 37 county sheriffs. That is unprecedented in the state of Minnesota's history. I'm supported by them because they want to me to aggressively support them in the work they do every day to put criminals in prison. And so I'll partner with county attorneys, county sheriffs around the state to aggressively prosecute violent crime. And I will tell you, I will not have done 50 cases over 4 years. We will have done hundreds of cases over 4 years to deal with the incredible violent crime on our streets. Number two, I'll use statutory tools like RICO, which unfortunately Keith Ellison has failed to do. He could use RICO today by himself with original jurisdiction, but he has failed to do that. Number three, we have to set a new tone for law enforcement in our state. Over these past few years, we've had an attorney general who's backed defunding the police, who has had a remarkably hostile attitude towards police, slandered them, vilified them. I will support police. I'll partner with them to end the violent crime in our communities. And I'll ensure that criminals who are currently emboldened on our streets know that once again, if they commit serious crime in the state of Minnesota, they will spend serious time in prison.
Keith, both of you have pledged again to use your office to fight crime. You are in the process of holding the office now. You asked for $1.8 million to hire 7 new criminal prosecutors. I'm bringing that to 10. Mr. Schultz has wanted 30. Can you talk about your office and how you prosecute crimes in the state? I know you mentioned it before just a bit, but maybe you want to take the time to go into it a little more.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let me first of all state that crime is a debilitating thing for victims. Victims must have the support of the state, of the prosecutors, of counties, and we have stood with victims. In fact, the fact of the matter is we have prosecuted every serious case that has been brought to us by every county. We've never lost one. We're 100%. We have been successful in every single case, including a case that was in Albert Lee just a few weeks ago when a police officer was shot. We got a conviction for first-degree attempted murder, as we have many other people. But prosecuting crime is important, but there are other things as well. We use civil tools to bring nuisance actions when we see that there are problem properties who won't stop poor conduct, bad criminal conduct on their own property. We're bringing actions to clean up negligent gun sales to make sure that, because you can't really have a serious conversation about crime without dealing with guns, but we're also dealing with wage theft, opioids, and making sure that people know that the Attorney General's office is there to have their back. May I just rebut one thing?
You can have Keith Ellison, you can have 45 seconds, and then Jim, I'm going to give you 45 seconds also to rebut.
Yeah, this issue of RICO, let me just say, this is absolutely incorrect. The fact of the matter is, if Jim understood the office and in the legislation that guides us, he would know that this is incorrect. Law professors, federal prosecutors, state prosecutors, I said, what is Mr. Schultz talking about? No, we've never done it. It's not been done. We have used it in a specific area of law, which is Medicaid fraud. But in the normal course of events to the cases that we're referred, it simply isn't true. I believe Jim knows that. I think he's just saying it for political purposes.
Jim Schultz, 45 seconds.
I'd say a few things. I mean, I'm glad, Keith, that you now know about RICO. During the last debate, you indicated that it simply was not in the applicable statutes. I'm glad that you've now informed yourself.
It's not, Jim. Sorry.
It's in 609. And so Keith, as well as I do,
609
that's currently in the statutes. It's 609, 902, Keith. And the fact is, it's there. And last debate, you indicated that it wasn't there. And the Attorney General has specific prosecutorial authority under Subdivision 9 to bring cases under that. Specific prosecutorial authority, folks can look it up. And so it's wrong. You know that you were mistaken last time, Keith. And the fact is, you have authority to do that. You could do it, but you just simply have no interest in using the tools that are available to you to prosecute violent crime. And that's representative of your office over these past 4 years.
All right, what we're going to do is take a break. Are we taking a break, right? No, we're going to keep going. All right. I got an email that said we're taking a break. We won't take a break. Let's keep going, and let's go to the individual questions now. We'll go back and forth, and you'll get the 45. The candidate not being asked the question will get a rebuttal. This next batch of questions has to do with issues that you in office may or may not have personal or political differences with, whatever the law of the state of Minnesota might be, and what would you do in that case? Jim, Minnesota is currently in litigation over an Insulin Affordability Act that was passed by the legislature. The pharmaceutical companies are suing to block the Alex Smith Insulin Affordability Act. If elected Attorney General, would you defend that program as passed by the Minnesota legislature?
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And I would do it aggressively and with vigor. I will defend Minnesota statutes. I will defend Minnesota law and enforce Minnesota law. And the fact is, this is an issue. Insulin affordability, healthcare availability broadly is something that's incredibly important. we have to ensure that Minnesotans have access to the healthcare they need, that it's not being kept from them inappropriately by healthcare companies, by insurance companies, or otherwise. And so, absolutely, I will aggressively defend that statute. I will defend any statute that the legislature of Minnesota passes and the governor signs. Unfortunately, we have an attorney general's office right now that spends its time focusing on its own political priorities, not the priorities of defending and enforcing Minnesota law. I will do that irrespective of my personal viewpoints. But in any event, this issue of insulin affordability and affordability of healthcare broadly is something that's very personal to me and that I care deeply about. And you better believe I will aggressively defend that statute.
Keith Ellison, a rebuttal.
You know, the woman who first talked to me about insulin affordability is a woman named Nicole Holt Smith. She is the founder of Insulin for All, and she started that group when her son Alex Smith died. In fact, the insulin bill you speak of is named in his honor. I testified and I organized to get that bill passed. I organized a task force to talk about pharmaceutical affordability. And now my office is successfully defending that statute as we speak. I'm not talking about what I'm going to do, I'm talking about what I have done and will continue to do, because I believe that everyone should be able to afford life-saving medicines that they need. And I've worked hard on the issue. We're prosecuting a case right now with 40 generic drug manufacturers that have conspired to jack up prices. It's a high priority for our office.
All right, on to the next issue, abortion. Keith, if the legislature or the new governor passes restrictions on abortion, would you defend those? And you didn't appeal the decision to throw out many of the state's limits on abortion. Talk about your stand, please.
Yeah, you know, as Attorney General, there is a principle of a duty to defend. And so I did defend statutes that I actually didn't approve of and actually voted against when I was a state legislature. We defended them anyway because they were constitutional statutes in the state of Minnesota. We didn't appeal them because we felt that Judge Gilligan's order was proper and right. You're asking me hypothetically if those laws were put back in place. We will defend constitutional laws. We can't defend laws that we believe are unconstitutional. So we would read them. We would see if they fit within the constitutional framework. If they didn't, we couldn't defend them. If they did, we would, even if we didn't like them. And the reason you listeners can know that that is true is because I've already done it. I make no bones about it. I don't believe in I didn't believe in some of those statutes that were passed. I voted against them, but I still defended them because I felt it was my job. I defended them as much as was wise to do, and didn't appeal. But you can bet that I will stand up for Minnesota statutes that are constitutional, but not ones that are not.
All right, Mr. Schultz, a rebuttal.
Well, I mean, broadly, we have to ensure that the Attorney General's office of Minnesota enforces and defends Minnesota law. I was disappointed that the Attorney General didn't appeal the decision. This is one that these are bipartisan statutes. That's most of which 70% or more of Minnesotans support. But what we need is an Attorney General who's apolitical, who enforces and defends Minnesota law, irrespective of his or her personal positions on it. And the fact is, we need an Attorney General that gets back to basics. We need an apolitical Attorney General, not that doesn't get behind these far left causes like defunding the police, doesn't get behind other causes like suing Ron DeSantis every other day of the week. What we need is an Attorney General's office that focuses on defending and enforcing Minnesota laws every day of the week.
Thank you. To Jim now on police prosecution. Would you have prosecuted Derek Chauvin had you been the Attorney General as that was unfolding?
Yes, absolutely. Derek Chauvin committed murder. It was appropriate to prosecute him for that. I don't know that anybody could watch the video of George Floyd being murdered without feeling it viscerally. I was physically ill watching it. He was murdered. He was a child of God that should still be with us here today. It was appropriate to prosecute him. There were elements of that of the trial that were disturbing, the leaking of plea negotiations and so forth. But nonetheless, it was appropriate to prosecute him. And when he appeals his prosecution, my office will ensure that we win that appeal and that he remains in prison.
Keith, a rebuttal?
Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear Jim say that. I mean, it seems to me that my whole life has been dedicated to the idea of equal justice under the law, that no one's above the law, no one's beneath the law. Certainly George Floyd's life he's not beneath the law, and Derek Chauvin's not above the law. And so it was not an easy case to prosecute, but we pulled it together and we did the best we could, and we delivered justice. And it was a moment when the eyes of the world were on Minnesota. And in that moment I delivered and came through, and it was something that I took no joy in, but it was necessary to do. And I'm proud we were successful. And I'm glad Jim would have done that prosecution as well.
Another high-profile case, Kim Potter. To Keith, why go from second degree to first degree on the charges against Kim Potter, former Brooklyn Center police officer charged in the shooting of Dante Wright? You have been accused by your opponent of irresponsibly upcharging. To what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's just because Jim has never prosecuted anyone. He doesn't understand the role of a prosecutor. But we took a fresh look at the case. I want to be clear. The case started in Hennepin, went to Washington County. My dear friend, Pete Orput, was in the final stages of his life. We didn't know that at the time, but he asked me to take that case, and I took it. He said, look, just take a fresh look, see what you think. And we did take a fresh look. And what we found is this, that what Kim Potter actually did was shot somebody Dante Wright, and killed him when she didn't know she had a gun in her hand. That is misdemeanor, reckless discharge of a firearm. When you kill somebody in the course of that, that's first-degree manslaughter. Now, that's separate from what her sentence should be. Her sentencing is different, and you'll note, Susie, that we didn't oppose her sentence when Judge Chu gave a downward departure, but a jury of 12 Minnesotans reviewed the case and found her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Kim Potter, to her credit, accepted responsibility and apologized to the family. So I think we handled the case properly.
And Jim, to you, will you vote to pardon her and commute her sentence if you are elected Attorney General?
Yes, I will vote to commute her sentence. Her prosecution for first-degree manslaughter was deeply disturbing. It was fundamentally politically motivated. The recommendation from Keith's friend, as he says, Pete Orput and Imran Ali, the Washington County prosecutors, was at most second-degree manslaughter. Keith Ellison took the case for politically motivated reasons. He upcharged her to first-degree manslaughter. I will tell you, anybody watching that video will know immediately that he says he learned towards. He was pleased to see at the end that Kim Potter was sorry for it. Well, I will tell you, nobody can watch that video. Nobody could see her testify in that case without knowing that this matter, her serious mistaken killing of Dante Wright, broke this woman. So anybody knows she was deeply sorry for it. And the upcharging to first-degree manslaughter was a representative example of an attorney general's office unhinged from the rule of law, focused on the politics, not on doing justice. We need an attorney general's office that will do justice every day of the week.
Keith Ellison, a rebuttal?
What you're really doing, Jim, is saying that Judge Chu doesn't know how to rule on a motion to dismiss for lack of probable cause because she found there was probable cause. What you're saying is that the jury of 12 people who reviewed every bit of evidence, they're wrong. The fact is, the lawyers in my office reviewed everything. We had expert witness who was an expert in the use of force. We did everything we were supposed to make. There was nothing political about that case. And let me just say, the reality is that equal justice under the law. Kim Potter understood that she made a grievous mistake, but when we make certain mistakes in life, we have to deal with the consequences. Kim Potter understood that. You don't understand that, unfortunately, and it would have been political not to charge her with the appropriate charge and not to sentence her with the appropriate sentence, which was a downward departure.
We gave Keith Ellison a bonus rebuttal, so I'll give Jim the same courtesy.
Kim Potter, it was appropriate for her to pay consequences for a serious mistake, and a man's life was lost. Absolutely. What we're differing on here is whether it was or not, it was appropriate to use prosecutorial discretion to charge her for a crime that she did not commit. You upcharged her to first-degree manslaughter. Anybody reading that statute, dealing with it fairly, views that as completely politically motivated. And the fact is, it's a representative example of your office, Keith. You know, I'm not criticizing it. The fact is, you had an opportunity to use your prosecutorial discretion appropriately there. You took recommendations from well-respected county attorneys, you ignored them, and then you upcharged her to first-degree manslaughter. That was completely inappropriate.
All right, it's 6:31. Let's take our first break. I got a little excited early. I wanted to take a break. We will take our first break, our first half hour done. We're going for 2 more half hours. We appreciate both Jim Schultz and Keith Ellison for taking part in this live debate here on News Talk 830 WCCO.
Add some fresh vibes to your fall wardrobe at JCPenney. Save up to 40% on men's and women's sweaters, jeans, and accessories. But don't stop there. Add a few faves to get ready for fall. And more styles means more options. Flare jeans to classic black pants. Chunky layers to plaid blazers. Remix and rematch versatile brands like St. John's Bay, Mutual Weave, A&A, and more. So everyone gets more for less. Shopping is back. JCPenney. Offer valid on select styles through 10/25. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
Hey Wolves fans, David Peach here, General Manager at Friendly Chevrolet. We're proud sponsors of the Minnesota Timberwolves and love it when we can help fans save money on their vehicles. In fact, in October, stop in for an oil change and tell us you're a Wolves fan and we'll give you $10 off, just like that. Plus, get $500 off when you pre-order any Silverado 1500, including the 2.7-liter Silverado that gets up to 480 miles on a full tank of gas. You can find us 2 miles north of 694 in Fridley and online at friendlychev.com. Go Wolves! See dealer for details.
Since starting Allegiant some 20 years ago, we've flown more than 100 million people to be with those they love. And just like you, we're excited to reconnect with the people and places that matter most. That's why we're going the distance for health and safety, on the ground and in the air. Because the further we go now, the safer it'll be to go farther tomorrow.
Non-stop flights from Minneapolis to Sarasota Bradenton International Airport, one way for as low as $67. Must be purchased by 8/3/2022 for travel between 10/6/2022 and 2/12/2023. Seats and dates are limited. Restrictions apply. See Allegiant.com for details.
Let me guess. Unknown caller? You could reduce the number of unwanted calls and emails with online privacy protection. The latest innovation from Discover. We'll help regularly remove your personal info, like your name and address, from 10 popular people search websites that could sell your data. And we'll do it for free. Activate in the Discover app. See terms and learn more at discover.com/online privacy protection.
It's Halloween time, witches. The tradition is back. It's Elizabeth, and we want to invite you to another Door Peninsula Winery virtual wine tasting event on Wednesday, October 26th. You'll join myself, my husband, and meet Door Peninsula Winery's head winemaker, Adam Stark. And it's virtual, so you can sip and learn about Door Peninsula's most loved wines in the comfort of your own home and ask questions in real time. Costumes are encouraged. Order your tasting kit by October 21st. Get all the ghoulish details at dcwine.com.
There's no shortage of plumbing, heating, and cooling companies in the Twin Cities. So how do you know who's reliable? Hi, it's Benita. I look to see how long they've been in business, and that's why I look to Cities One Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Over 100 years experience, the professionals at Cities One Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning have been serving the Twin Cities with reliable, dependable service. Family owned and operated, they have a live person answering their phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Contact Cities One Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning at citiesoneplumbing.com.
Remember when you were told bigger is better? Well, that's just simply not the case. Do you want a big bill? No. A big burden? No. What about a big bulky tank water heater taking up space in your basement? No, I didn't think so. What you do want is to make all of those things smaller. Navien tankless water heaters are more efficient and take up less space than outdated bulky tanks, with cutting-edge features that improve safety, simplify processes, and increase capabilities. Once you go Navien, you'll never go back. Learn more at tanklessmadesimple.com.
How do we measure road trips? In miles traveled and memories made, in scenic views and back roads that don't show up on your GPS, and in the wrong turns that turn out to be the right decisions. It's not about how far you can go, but how far you're inspired to move. The 2023 Kia Niro Hybrid goes the extra mile with class-leading 53 mpg combined. Farther for all. The all-new 2023 Kia Niro Hybrid. Kia, movement that inspires. 2023 Niro HEV SX fuel economy claim based on EPA estimated combined fuel economy for entry CUV class. Actual mileage will vary with options, driving conditions, driving habits, and your vehicle's condition. See fueleconomy.gov for more details.
Conquer pet hair like a pro with the new Maytag Pet Pro Laundry Pair at Lowe's. Engineered for homes with pets, this washer visibly removes 5 times more pet hair. The system's built-in Pet Pro filter catches hair and separates it from your load of laundry. Now you can spend more time with your pets and less time cleaning up. Visit Lowe's.com now to shop the Maytag Pet Pro Laundry Pair. Comparing normal cycle with Pet Pro filter and options to cycle using traditional agitator without. Results will vary while supplies last. Valid through 10/26.
You can't get much for $5 these days, unless you go to Wendy's for a $5 Biggie Bag. Get your choice of double stack, junior bacon cheeseburger, or crispy chicken BLT, plus 4-piece nugs, fries, and a drink, all for just $5. That was smooth, wasn't it? That's how you're going to feel when you get that Biggie Bag at Wendy's.
U.S. price and participation may vary. Includes 4-piece nuggets, small soft drink, and small fry. Prices may be higher in Alaska and Hawaii.
Now, the latest conditions and outlook with your CCO weather forecast.
All right, time to check the forecast. Here's Paul Douglas.
Most of us already experienced the first frost. Tonight, the first hard freeze. A hard freeze defined as a few hours colder than 28, cold enough to kill off any remaining plant life. And that will be the case tonight, mid-20s. And then by the weekend, a shot at 70 degrees. Second summer is coming later this week. A streak of 60s. Sadly, dry weather right through the weekend. Plenty of sunshine each day. Chance of a little bit of rain in here Sunday night and Monday, but not the rain we need right now.
All right, thanks, Paul. The weather brought to you by Cities One Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. The temperature right now, 35 degrees.
You're listening to a Minnesota Votes Special, a debate with the candidates for Attorney General on News Talk 830 WCCO, sponsored by AARP, Minnesota Corn Growers, and Minnesota Credit Unions.
And we continue our live debate here inside our WCCO Radio studio. Susie Jones, Jason DeRusha moderating a debate between Keith Ellison and Jim Schultz. We are 30 minutes through. We are asking each candidate individual questions. Their opponent has 45 seconds for a rebuttal to these questions. We pick things up with a question to you, Jim. And this is a question about your history as an attorney. You have singled out some of the people that your opponent defended as a defense attorney. Mm-hmm. Why have you not shared a list of your clients as an attorney for hedge funds?
Well, I would say.
And will you right now?
Yeah, well, I'd say a few things. I've represented a broad swath of clients in my career. The most recent client that I worked for was an investment firm based here in Minneapolis, an investment firm that the state of Minnesota Pension Board, on which Keith Ellison sits, is invested. I've represented everybody from school districts to municipalities. I represented a suburban school district in an ice arena years ago. I've done a variety of work ethically under Rule 1.6 of the Minnesota Professional Standards for Lawyers. I'm prohibited from disclosing my client list, but it's everything from school districts to cities to small businesses to a couple larger businesses here in the Twin Cities. We of course have Fortune 500 companies here in the Twin Cities that I've also represented. I've done a wide swath of work. I'm very proud of my legal career. I've practiced at two of the largest, most well-respected law firms in the entire world, and I've got nothing to be ashamed about in my client list. And what I've just mentioned is representative examples.
Response from Keith Ellison.
Well, I'll tell you who I've represented. I've represented tenants who were dealing with very unfair circumstances, where they were one group of tenants in North Minneapolis, 267 families. The judge found that they were living in conditions of biblical plague proportions, rats, gnats. That's who we stood up for. We represented the people of the state of Minnesota in the opioid cases, $323 million that we've returned to the people of the state of Minnesota for things like prevention, for things like education. You know, the fact is we have had income inequality in our country that has been staggering. Hedge fund profits have been through the roof. Jim criticizes me a lot because I'm suing ExxonMobil. They have been price gouging people throughout the state, throughout the country during the pandemic. And, you know, the bottom line is this is a very clear contrast as to who you're going to get, a consumer advocate, a workers advocate, and a hedge fund and Wall Street lawyer.
All right, our next question deals with the politics that have been thrown about. Another charge against Keith Ellison, some saying that you're too political. Why did you support the ballot question, which would have replaced the police department with a public safety agency in Minneapolis? And are you too political?
I would say not at all. You know, the fact is that, you know, we live in Minneapolis, and I love this city, but I can tell you that it was back in 1989 when I remember as a law student, you know, Lillian Weiss and Lloyd Smalley were killed when the police delivered a flashbang grenade at their house for a drug warrant. They both died. There was no drugs. There were no weapons. You know, the fact is our city, a great city, we need to have reform. We can do better. I'm so proud that the mayor and the city council now have a commission of public community safety, that we have reformed the no-knock warrant policy. We are improving the relationship between police and community. That is a good thing because it builds trust. And when you have trust, you can have what St. Paul has. St. Paul has as much of a 90% clearance rate on homicides. Minneapolis is about 30%. It could get higher if citizens feel that they can report, that they can be respected. And I'm proud of the progress that our city is making. But I think we've got to make that progress. We've got under DOJ investigation. We're in the state of Minnesota civil rights investigation, and we do need to make progress.
Rebuttal, Mr. Schultz, Jim?
I'll note that Attorney General Ellison didn't answer the question. He supported the most reckless and extreme public safety policy in Minnesota's history. He supported defunding and dismantle Minnesota's largest police force. And there's a reason why 70% of some precincts in North Minneapolis to 70% of some precincts in Linden Hills and many things in between opposed it. In Minneapolis, that effort failed by 15 points. Fairly left-leaning city, as we all know, but it still failed by 15 points because it was reckless and it was immoral. It was immoral to propose taking away from disadvantaged communities, vulnerable communities that are consumed by crime and violence, the fundamental protections of law enforcement. That was deeply disturbing. And that in itself is enough not to reelect Keith Ellison.
Did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I did. You know, let me tell you, you know, when Judea Reynolds saw George Floyd killed right in front of her, that impacted her, and it may impact her for a lifetime. Trying to work with police and community to come up with a better relationship so that citizens can feel comfortable and great about their police department. Let me tell you, I'm working right now, and I don't know if you know about this, Jim, but there's an effort called 21 Days of Peace, where where Inspector Charlie Adams is working with local pastors to reduce crime. And the city of Minneapolis has seen a 20% reduction in homicide over year. And so things are getting better, but they're not getting better simply by throwing names around. They're getting better by putting yourself in the middle of the conflict and trying to come up with better results, putting your hands in the conflict and making sure that people come out better than they were before. So I make no apologies, and I think you don't really know what you're talking about because you don't live in the neighborhood. You don't live in Minneapolis. You're not part of you're not part of this thing. You're just standing from a distance throwing rocks.
I'll respond to that. I'm a citizen of the state of Minnesota. I have a sister who lives in Northside Minneapolis, as you will know, Keith, who had a gunfight on her front lawn. I'm well acquainted with the challenges of Minneapolis and the violence in our cities. Unfortunately, there are a few Minnesotans these days, there are a few folks in the metro who are not acquainted with the incredible violence that has consumed our communities these past few years. And they've consumed them because of the reckless policies you, the Minneapolis City Council, Ilhan Omar, and others have embraced. And the things you just said, they all sound great. Partnering with the community, 21 days of peace, and so forth. What doesn't sound so great is dismantling the largest police force in the state of Minnesota. That was reckless, wrong, Keith, and you should not only lose this reelection, but simply for that, you should spend the rest of your career apologizing to the people of Minnesota for embracing a policy as reckless as wrong as defunding the police.
Well, I never stood for defunding the police. Let me be clear. In fact, Fox 9 found that to be misleading, fact check. And I would just note that the first hearing I ever did as the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota was to ask for more money for law enforcement. Over the last 4 years, I've asked for millions of dollars to fight crime and put violent criminals in jail and be there for victims. I must be the worst defunder ever. The fact is, we need a conversation about how to make sure police and community are working together in a way that is best for both. I make no apologies for trying to bring people together. That's what I'm about, and that's what I believe in. And that's why one of the first things I did is I worked with Chief Harrington, who's the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota, to have a working group on reducing deadly force encounters with police, which had both police and citizens on it. That's what it's about, Jim. You've got to be a uniter, not just a rock thrower from a distance.
I do think this is useful for voters because this issue has been a key issue on the campaign trail. So if you don't mind, if we can stick with this for a little bit more. But Keith Ellison, if today the ballot question that Minneapolis voters were faced with came up, would you have taken a public position, or would you not have taken a position on that ballot?
Let me tell you, today we have a Department of Community Safety led by a very seasoned police leader, Cedric Alexander, who I talk with on a regular basis. We have real policies on hiring, training. We have made progress. We're going to make more. And so, look, the things that I wanted are being done. I can tell you that I have a lot of friends around this city, including the mayor, and some of them felt, Keith, we can make the changes without changing the charter. And some of them felt we support the police, but we think that a charter change might be in order to get a more expansive, including mental health, housing, including chemical health. There were people on both sides. No, everybody who was a no wants to do more reform. Everybody who was a yes, believes that we need our police and good constitutional policing. Equal justice policing is great for our city. What I'm saying is that this issue was not simplistic, and so I'm answering your question. Mm-hmm. The things that I was supporting and the reasons I was supporting it are being achieved. So at this point, I think we're getting the best of the both worlds. We're getting the kind of changes that we wanted.
So, Jim, are you opposed to the changes that Keith Ellison just talked about, some of the reforms and the changes that have been put into place in the city of Minneapolis?
Well, Cedric Alexander, he's a capable leader and so forth. And some of the other changes that have been made, sure, that's positive. But that wasn't the charter amendment. Let's be very clear about what the charter amendment was. It was to remove the minimum staffing ratios requiring a minimum number of police officers in our state and in our city. Now, why would you change that if your intent was not, in fact, to dramatically reduce the number of police officers on our streets? The fact is, you could do all the things that Attorney General Ellison is talking about, that is mental health support, social worker support, and so forth, without changing the charter amendment to defund the police and dismantle the Minneapolis police force. But he still supported it. I'm glad, Keith, that it sounds like you no longer support it. That is a positive development, considering how reckless your previous support was. But the fact is, that charter amendment said, explicitly contemplated in parenthetical, people can look this up, to the, if any, police in the future, if any, expressly contemplated a world in which Minneapolis does not have a police force. That is utopian nonsense. Everybody knows it. The fact is, we need police on our streets because they keep Minnesotans safe. And the fact that we have an attorney general who backs a charter amendment and who has backed it for years and cannot recognize that we need police on Minnesota streets is deeply wrong and immoral.
If I may.
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
Folks, just do your own fact check. I've never supported defund the police, Even Fox 9 fact checked that and called it misleading. I have actually been to the legislature seeking more resources for law enforcement. But I do want to insist that in the city of Minneapolis, after the death of George Floyd, we needed a conversation about how we can heal community. I will never apologize for that. And I'm glad I worked with my allies on both sides of the question to make sure that we had a neighborhood, a community that is not just safer, but also has a better, more better relationship with our police and our community. And I'm on the ground on Plymouth and on Plymouth and Lindale, on Broadway and Lindale. I'm on the ground. And so I'll just say that, Jim, I think that you're having an uninformed opinion that's based on the fact that you're trying to win a partisan election. And so you're going to throw this mud. I know you will, but I want people to hear the other side of it.
Unfortunately, Keith, it's very easy to have an informed opinion on this. You can simply read the charter and the charter amendment that you proposed. See the results.
That I did not
Just
propose.
see the results that
I never proposed it.
that you got behind.
Can we fact check
and supported
this?
publicly. In fact, remember the ads that would run would say Keith Ellison supported the charter amendment. The ads would run continually supporting this, and it lost by 15 points in Minneapolis. And by the way, just as a fact check, he talks about how he supported more resources for law enforcement. Well, he supported more resources for his office. That's what he supported. More resources for his office. What he didn't support, for example, was the public safety package coming out of the legislature this year. Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher said that he was missing in action as they tried to get this public safety package through. Missing in action. The Attorney General of Minnesota missing in action.
I would simply say that's not true. Again, we supported the governor's and the legislature's attempt to get more resources. It was the Republican legislature that killed that bill, not the Attorney General's office. The fact is that, look, this idea of constitutional policing, of policing where everyone is treated with equality and respect, is important. We've worked on it. We've pulled together task forces on it. I've sought resources, yes, for my office, because guess what? We are also law enforcement at the Attorney General's office. That's why we have prosecuted nearly 50 cases and convicted every single person we have prosecuted. But it's also, Jim, why we have gone after negligent gun sales. It's also why we have gone after taking nuisance action against problem properties. It's why we have gotten returned so much money for people who have suffered the scourge of the opioid crisis, and why we've stood up for problem landlords who have required people to live in bad conditions, and why we have gone after wage theft. We are in the fight, Jim. We're not standing behind throwing rocks for political purposes.
Okay.
We are getting things done.
Let's move on to some other topic areas. Susie has the next question.
All right, very good. And if you're just joining us, you are listening to a live debate between Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and his Republican challenger, Jim Schultz. And the next question goes to Jim. Jim, we've mentioned this before recently. How do you respond to charges that you have no experience in a courtroom?
So what we need in the Attorney General's office is leadership. It has lots of very capable litigators. As folks know, Keith Ellison knows, even though he's made an issue of it, the Attorney General doesn't go to court. I know Keith Ellison sits in back of court and takes notes sometimes for the cameras and so forth. The Attorney General doesn't go to court. The Attorney General is about leading an office of a couple hundred people, setting policy, working with the legislature to get important legislation through. And it's about leadership. We need an Attorney General with the right priorities that can drive this office to a better place. It's been 50 years in the hands of one party, 50 years. And right now, that office has not been recalibrated for the demands that Minnesota now faces. Right now, we're living through the worst violent crime crisis in many decades in our state. And unfortunately, Keith Ellison and his office have sat on their hands throughout. And so what I'll do is bring leadership and vision to an office that desperately, desperately needs it. I'm very proud of my career. I've worked at two of the largest, most well-respected law firms in the world, doing some of the most sophisticated transactions in the world. And the fact is, I'll bring incredible legal experience as well as real leadership to an office that really does need it.
Keith?
Yeah, Jim has made a big deal about prosecution, yet he's never done it in his life. I've done many prosecutions and been on and been litigating for years, and that's why I know how to train lawyers, how to work with lawyers developing case strategy, how to make sure that we obtain and identify the right witnesses and get the right theory of the case. Working with lawyers and being able to help train them and bring cases along is based on the fact that I have done it, not something, when I get in there, I'm working with my colleagues as someone who understands what they're doing, but it's not just litigating. Jim's never led any organization that I've ever seen. I've led multitudes of them. And on top of that, I've never seen him do any public service whatsoever. Everything he's ever done has been, has been, I don't know, I guess trying to deny people abortions is basically his shot at public service.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
I'd say a few things. I'm not sure where you got that, Keith, but I've been a leader all my life. From when I was in high school, earned the Eagle Scout Award, and led my Boy Scout troop, to leading my track and cross country teams, to managing multi-billion-dollar transactions, leading teams of attorneys and others, to leading in the nonprofit sector. I currently sit on the board of you talk about public service. I sit on the board of the Frontline Foundation, which supports the families of first responders who are killed in the line of duty. I sit there. I've sat on the Hennepin County Capital Budget Task Force, in important work in Hennepin County. And I've also worked at the Pentagon. So I'm not sure where you're getting your misinformation, Keith, but you probably should look that up.
30 seconds. We have to break.
Where I'm getting it from is that I have been the principal leader of multiple organizations, not just some board member, but the person who ran my congressional office, who runs the Attorney General now, who ran the Legal Rights Center, who was one of the top 2 people at the City Inc., which is a former alternative school in Minnesota. I mean, I've been at the top leadership and had managerial responsibility, Jim. It's not just a matter of sitting on a board here or there.
Oh, I've had plenty of managerial responsibility, Keith, and I can certainly tell you about that anytime.
I'd love to hear about it. I haven't heard it yet.
We have to take a break, gentlemen. Again, you are listening to a live debate between Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and his Republican challenger, Jim Schultz. It is 6:57 on WCCO Radio, 35 degrees, partly cloudy. We'll be back after national and local news with more of the debate until 7:30.
When there's an issue you want to express an opinion about.
I don't understand what the big deal is. This commentary is just reckless.
I have an obligation to advocate.
Use the Cities One Plumbing talk and text line. When you have an issue with your heating, cooling, or plumbing, use Cities One Plumbing. To schedule an appointment, including emergency situations, log on to citiesoneplumbing.com. That's cities, the number 1, plumbing.com.
Add some fresh vibes to your fall wardrobe at JCPenney. Save up to 40% on men's and women's sweaters, jeans, and accessories. But don't stop there. Add a few faves to get ready for fall. And more styles means more options. Flare jeans to classic black pants. Chunky layers to plaid blazers. Remix and rematch versatile brands like St. John's Bay, Mutual Weave, A&A, and more. So everyone gets more for less. Shopping is back. JCPenney. Offer valid on select styles through 10/25. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
Hey Wolves fans, David Peach here, General Manager at Friendly Chevrolet. We're proud sponsors of the Minnesota Timberwolves and love it when we can help fans save money on their vehicles. In fact, in October, stop in for an oil change and tell us you're a Wolves fan and we'll give you $10 off just like that. Plus get $500 off when you pre-order any Silverado 1500, including the 2.7-liter Silverado that gets up to 480 miles on a full tank of gas. You can find us 2 miles north of 694 in Fridley and online at friendlychev.com. Go Wolves! See dealer for details.
Since starting Allegiant some 20 years ago, we've flown more than 100 million people to be with those they love. And just like you, we're excited to reconnect with the people and places that matter most. That's why we're going the distance for health and safety, on the ground and in the air. Because the further we go now, the safer it'll be to go farther tomorrow.
Non-stop flights from Minneapolis to Sarasota Bradenton International Airport, one way for as low as $67. Must be purchased by 8/3/2022 for travel between 10/6/2022 and 2/12/2023. Seats and dates are limited. Restrictions apply. See Allegiant.com for details.
Hear the news and newsmakers here. News Talk 830, WCCO, KMNB HD2, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Always streaming on the free Odyssey app.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Rocket Mortgage.
I'm Jennifer Kuiper in Chicago. In the race for Georgia governor, the candidates lob questions at each other during a debate. Incumbent Republican Brian Kemp says when it comes to Medicare expansion,
the problem is it's a broken government program that she wants the government to decide your health care that will also kick 200,000 private citizens off their private sector health care.
Democrat Stacey Abrams responds.
We have 19 hospitals at risk of closure, joining the 6 hospitals that have closed under this governor. We are sending a Brinks truck of $3.5 billion of our money to Kentucky, to Louisiana, to Ohio, because this governor will not accept the money.
On the mind of many voters as they begin heading to the polls and early voting for the midterm elections is the economy. Natalie Brand reports the new CBS News polling shows many voters believe it has worsened.
65% of registered voters surveyed said they feel the economy is getting worse, compared to 15% who think it's getting better. While abortion remains a top issue for Democrats,
I need to be able to protect my rights as a woman.
CBS polling found the percentage who say abortion is very important is slightly lower now than last month.
CBS News polling also shows control of the Senate is still a toss-up. Republicans are estimated to take control of the House with 224 seats. Russia is inflicting a new type of terror on several major cities in Ukraine using Iranian-made kamikaze drones. Ukrainian President Zelensky says his military was able to shoot down many of the drones, but the wave of attacks killed at least 4 people, including a pregnant woman. CBS's Holly Williams has more.
A swarm of so-called suicide drones bombarded Ukraine's capital. Kamikaze weapons packed with deadly explosives that detonate on impact. They've been used to attack frequently in recent weeks. They rained down on city streets. Russia's repeatedly claimed that it doesn't target civilians, but this neighborhood in Kyiv is home to apartment buildings, restaurants, and schools.
Former U.S. Attorney General Benjamin Civiletti has died, according to a statement by current Attorney General Merrick Garland. Civiletti was 87 years old. He served in President Jimmy Carter's administration and later became one of the nation's most expensive private attorneys. In 2005, Civiletti became the nation's first lawyer to charge $1,000 an hour. President Biden says the new studentaid.gov website is now live for those who want to apply for up to $10,000 to $20,000 worth of federal student loan relief.
More than 40 million Americans can stand to benefit from this relief.
This is CBS News.
This hour's newscast is presented by Rocket Mortgage. Need to know what it takes for a home loan to fit your budget and your family? Rocket can.
The voice of record for the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and the upper Midwest. This is Minnesota's information station. Now, here are the latest headlines from News Talk 830 WCCO.
I'm Laura Oakes. A vice presidential campaign stop for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz this weekend. Vice President Kamala Harris will be in town on Saturday. The invitation going out to donors this afternoon. She will be in Minneapolis in the early afternoon. No other details have been released. U of M Regents Vice Chair Steve Swigum says he's surprised his question concerning the diversity of the Minnesota Morris campus is creating controversy.
Last week, Swigum asked the school's interim chancellor if the campus is too diverse and if that is leading to a decline in enrollment. Swigum told WCCO's Vanita Sakar that he was looking for information, not taking a stance on campus diversity at Minnesota Morris.
I don't understand how asking a comment or a question makes them defensive. I think that you should just deal with the issue, deal with the facts.
Swigum noted that statistics show the Minnesota Morris campus is more diverse than it was a decade ago, and during that time, enrollment is down significantly. He says he based his question on 2 letters from friends whose children chose not to go to Morris because the diversity made them uncomfortable. The exchange came during a Regents meeting last week.
I don't see asking a question as being offensive or wrong, and certainly not racist.
Al Shock, News Talk 830 WCCO.
Hearing aids are now available over the counter. Dr. Tina Wong is an ear, nose, and throat specialist at the U of M, and she says these OTC models are meant only for those with mild to moderate hearing loss.
Somebody goes out and tries 1, 2, 3 sets of hearing aids, and they're still having difficulty hearing. That should really alert them that their hearing loss is probably more than just mild to moderate.
In the weather tonight, clearing with a hard freeze, low 25. I'm Laura Oakes, News Talk 830 WCCO.
From the Chris Lindahl Real Estate Guaranteed Offer Studios, this is News Talk 830 WCCO.
Add some fresh vibes to your fall wardrobe at JCPenney. Save up to 40% on men's and women's sweaters, jeans, and accessories. But don't stop there. Add a few faves to get ready for fall. And more styles means more options. Flare jeans to classic black pants. Chunky layers to plaid blazers. Remix and rematch versatile brands like St. John's Bay, Mutual Weave, A&A, and more. So everyone gets more for less. Shopping is back. JCPenney. Offer valid on select styles through 10/25. Exclusions apply. See store or jcp.com for details.
You're listening to a Minnesota Votes Special, a debate with the candidates for Attorney General on News Talk 830 WCCO, sponsored by AARP, Minnesota Corn Growers, and Minnesota Credit Unions.
Jason DeRusha and Susie Jones moderating a debate between the two candidates for Attorney General from the DFL and Republican parties, Attorney General Keith Ellison and Jim Schultz. We are 1 hour into our debate, and we will pick up right where we left off. The next question goes to you, Attorney General Keith Ellison. During the time of COVID, there was quite a bit of controversy about whether or not small businesses should be prosecuted for violating some of the orders that came during the executive order, during the emergency orders from the governor. Why did you choose to prosecute some of the businesses in Minnesota?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's important to note we're talking about civil action, not criminal. But let me just take you back to March 2020. 13, we ended up with people, we didn't have any vaccine. People were literally dying. The only kind of defense and protection people had was that of masking and social distancing. So 50 states, by the way, came up with some form of quarantine. And in our state, we said that, look, we got to do some things differently. And we saw restaurants move to takeout. We saw, distancing, and we saw that we responded. And most restaurants and bars did what they needed to do to protect their consumers, protect their employees. In fact, 10,000 restaurants and 1,500 bars exist in our state, and we only had to bring 11 cases to get people to comply with the rules that were the law. But what I did to save the lives of people. We never lost a single case in court. And what we did do is we saved lives, and we did it and we did it because people's lives are really important and their families are.
Jim Schultz.
I'd say a few things. COVID was incredibly serious. We all know that. What we should have had through that period was the law applied equally and constitutionally. So, for example, we shouldn't have had instances where churches, synagogues, mosques were closed and targets open down the street. We have a First Amendment in this country, a First Amendment that protects the free exercise of religion, and that was deeply wrong that we closed them. It was wrong, frankly, that you've got Target open and many businesses just shut down fully. And a lot of Minnesotans resent the fact that Minneapolis, a half of the city street in Minneapolis got burned to the ground. Hardly anybody got prosecuted. And Keith Ellison's office was aggressively going after every small business in the state who opened up for 5 minutes. A lot of people resent that.
Keith Ellison, go ahead.
We did operate constitutionally, and we operated with fairness. The fact is, we kept people in their apartments. We enforced the eviction order because you can't shelter in place if you don't have a shelter. We also advocated and supported for small business support, PPP loans, things like that, to get people through this very difficult period. But people need to remember, we lost over 13,738 Minnesotans, 13,000 funerals, 13,000 chairs that will not be at a Thanksgiving dinner. We did all we could to protect them, and that is what we did. Now, I want to thank all the bars and restaurants that complied voluntarily and put their customers first and put their employees first. It was a very difficult time in our state's history, and we're getting through it.
Jason?
The next question goes to Jim. The Feeding Our Future fraud has been a major story here in Minnesota and around the country. At that moment when the Department of Education and the state suspected fraud, if you were Attorney General, what would you have specifically done differently?
Well, a few things. Number one, I would have advised the Department of Education as counsel as their counsel to immediately cease payments. We knew very early on, May of 2020, it became evident that Feeding Our Future was fraudulent. Nonetheless, payments continued to go out. It is unclear, Keith Ellison still has not explained how it is that the advice must have been to continue making payments to a completely fraudulent nonprofit, even after the FBI was notified a year later in April of 2021. $200 million went out the door. And then, since then, Keith Ellison and others have spent their time lying about it. First, they said the judge made him do it. Then they said the FBI made him do it. Then Attorney General Ellison said he couldn't tell the truth because of attorney-client privilege. Then he said there were no tools available to him. There's a variety of tools, including under 8.31 of Minnesota statutes, where he could have gone after this nonprofit fraud. He elected not to do so. He still hasn't explained why. Maybe it's because he received thousands of dollars of campaign contributions from individuals affiliated with Feeding Our Future. Maybe it's for some other purpose. But at the end of the day, it demonstrated historic incompetence that led to historic fraud.
Keith Ellison.
Can we keep in mind that we had a successful criminal fraud prosecution going on right now? 49 people who were involved in this fraud are now facing criminal indictment. 3 of them have already pled guilty. We alerted the authorities and we alerted Department of Agriculture and then the FBI. We alerted the Postal Service, the IRS, and Department of Justice. And it has been federal authorities here in town who have been very clear that they thank the state of Minnesota for their success in being able to obtain these criminal indictments. Here's the reality. 4 federal agencies, over 100 agents, and multi-continents investigation. And what has happened is that we have gotten fraudsters and charged them, and they are all facing prosecution right now. This is not about politics. This is about getting to the bottom of a fraud investigation. And here's the thing. If you did what Jim said, you start doing things to tip off the federal investigation, phones get wiped, computers get wiped, documents disappear, people start absconding to other countries as other people did, as some people tried to do, and that is what happens. What we did is we cooperated and we did not talk about the federal investigation. And as a result, we have a successful fraud investigation going on now. How come nobody in the federal government is attacking us and only partisan Republicans are doing such? Because they think it's to their advantage. Fraud happens. We alerted the authorities. We cooperate with the investigation, and we have 49 indictments to show for it.
Jim Schultz.
It's hard to know where to start on that serious misinformation. So, number one, May of 2020 to April of 2021, there is no involvement from the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office. So there could have been no direction from them related to it. But nonetheless, Keith Ellison's office apparently advised the Department of Education to continue sending out payments. Number two, April 2021 and thereafter, the FBI is involved. I will tell you that the FBI is not in the habit of advising victims of theft to continue paying out $200 million to the thieves. They don't do it. It didn't happen here. So there must be some other cause. The fact is, it simply did not happen. And I bet Andy Luger in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, Keith, do not appreciate you implying that they're the ones who were responsible for $200 million going out the door to people that in a manner that was unrecoverable. The fact is, they didn't happen here, Keith. And you still, I laid out 4 lies about your role in the case. You still have not answered those lies. You still have not spoken to those.
Jim, how would you know? You've never done a criminal investigation. You don't know what it means to make sure you catch a criminal in the act of the fraud. You've got to be able to follow the money to find out everybody who's involved in it. You've got to be able to identify who's leading it. You've got to be able to find the structure of the fraud. And that is why the FBI said, do not tell the fraudsters, do not tip them off about this fraud. That's the reality of the situation, Jim. You don't know because you've never done it. And you said nothing will be recovered. That's obviously wrong, because in January of 2022, when the search warrants went out, they recovered and identified very high degree of the property that had been taken and improperly obtained. So you can't say that. You don't know that, and it's wrong. And I can know that you are, in fact, are incorrect. Now, just to make sure that everybody is well aware, we are talking about 4 federal agencies, 100 agents, multi-continents. This is a complex criminal fraud, and you are playing politics with it, which is extremely unfortunate. We did what we were supposed to do. We got 49 indictments for it, and that is the fact of the matter. You have absolutely no experience. You've never done a criminal investigation. You have no idea what it is to have to do wiretaps, search warrants all over the world, including perhaps in other countries. You just don't know. So you're speaking politically, Jim. That is what you're doing. And I understand why you're trying to get an advantage in an election, but you're messing around with a criminal fraud investigation. And I actually wish you'd stop doing that.
I'll say a few things here. Keith is trying to make it sound really complex. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to crack this case. What you do is you subpoena the bank records, and you see where the money is going. And you see, for example, that it was purchasing $2 million houses and $90,000 Porsches and $90,000 trucks. This doesn't take rocket science. It is interesting, Keith, that you've actually come out and said tonight that the FBI told you to continue making payments. That's an interesting fact, and I'm interested in to see what the reaction from the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office is to that, because that is a flat out lie. It didn't happen. There's no way that happened. The idea the idea that the FBI advised you to, in order to catch a crime of $50 million, the idea that the FBI advised you to continue sending out making payments in the amount of $200 million is completely not serious, Keith. It's a lie, Keith. And you still haven't explained why it happened. Was it the donations that you received from people affiliated with it? Was it donations that other DFL leaders, including Jeremiah Ellison, including others in DFL politics? What was it that led you to continue making $200 million of payments when you already knew it was fraudulent, Keith? It was fraudulent. We knew it at that time. The FBI absolutely did not tell you to make those payments.
Just so people know, nobody could have known who donates to you, and all that money has been returned to the place, and has been, and we don't have that. Jim, 4 federal agencies, 100 agents, taking months between the time that the search warrants were served in January 2022 to the time of the indictments. That's 9 months. Now, so the fact is, you're talking about how the FBI, what the FBI did and didn't tell us. How could you possibly know that? And let me just say this: the fact is, if we would have tipped them off, people would have fled, people would have burned documents, they would have wiped phones, they would have wiped computers, and the FBI would not be able to get to the bottom of the fraud. It's not about grandstanding. It's about working with federal partners. And I work with federal partners all the time. It's part of what was required in the job. We work with Erica McDonald. We work with Andy Lugar. We work with Michael Paul. We work with we work with our federal partners on a whole range of things all the time. And if you start burning them, they won't cooperate with you. And we have worked with them on civil rights investigations, on COVID response, on this and on other things as well. If you grandstand with your federal partners, you won't have federal partners, and you won't catch 49 fraudsters as we did. Notice, everybody who's listening to this dialogue, look for the nonpartisan person casting blame. They're not there because this is all political.
So the listeners know the FBI doesn't comment on ongoing investigations, nor does the U.S.
But they
Attorney's
did,
Office.
though.
So they're not going. All they said was they thank the state for their cooperation. They will say that as long as you don't throw a wrench in their investigation.
Which you would have done.
I'd say a few things here. So he's talking about the federal partner. So we know that the FBI did not tell the attorney general to send out $200 million. We just know that. Now, even if we bracket that,
you're wrong.
We say
Jim.
May to April, May of 2020 to April, before the FBI is involved. Tens of millions of dollars go out the door. There's no possible excuse that the federal agents made him do it. There's no possible excuse there. And so the question is, well, the FBI wasn't involved. The U.S. Attorney's Office wasn't involved. So why was it then that tens of millions of dollars went out, either before April 2021 when the FBI got out or after? The fact is, the attorney general here is lying. Every attorney who's involved in law enforcement knows it. I've spoken with them around town. The fact is, Keith Ellison is lying to the people of Minnesota. The fact is that $250 million went out the door to a nonprofit that we knew was fraudulent. We knew it was fraudulent, and it's not politics. The fact is, Minnesotans want answers, and Minnesotans want to know that their donor money, that their taxpayer money is going to the purposes for which it was donated. And the fact is, we need an attorney general's office that shows some interest in that.
Jim Schultz got the first word on this topic, and so Keith Ellison will get the last of this series of questions.
First of all, when it comes to donor money, we have a very active charities enforcement group that is doing a great job, that is actually going after Feeding Our Future and has been for quite a long time. This is not charity money. This is federal money from a federal program, which is why the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the IRS, and U.S. Postal Service put 100 agents together to investigate this fraud over the course of months. This is not charities money, and I think that please don't be deceived by that representation. Let's just talk about the money from May 2020 all the way around till
I hate to do
Christmas.
it, but just 30 seconds. Please.
Okay, no problem. When the state learned that there was discrepancy and that they were trying to ask for more sites and the growth was precipitous, that's when the stop payment and the refusal to expand the number of sites, that's when that was put a stop to. That's why the Feeding Our Future sued the state of Minnesota, and that's why we showed up in court and refused to make those payments until the court said, look, you're going to have a big problem unless you keep it going. The state got sanctioned $35 million plus another $11 million in attorney's fees because we were not cooperating with this. But then we went to the FBI, and the FBI said, look, we're going to get them. And guess what? We got them.
Okay, let's move on because it is 7:22 and we will end at 7:30. So we'll move on to the next topic. We'll start with Jim first. Name one thing that you would like changed in our criminal justice system. Keep the time in mind as we conclude this debate and move toward the conclusion.
Well, I mean, there's several legislative proposals that I've talked about. We need, for example, specifically codified crime for carjacking. Right now, we're living through this period of 750 carjackings just in Minneapolis, hundreds more in St. Paul, and are, of course, felt in the suburbs as well. We need to ensure that people who engage in carjacking know that there will be significant penalties associated with it. We also need to ensure that we're dealing with this historic crisis of law enforcement where we are down hundreds of police officers in the metro area. We need recruiting, retention bonuses. We need to ensure that we have the resources to make sure that we've got the police officers we need on the streets with the resources they need to put criminals in prison. We have to do that. We have to ensure that we are, again, focused in the state of Minnesota on dealing with this historic crisis. There's far too much lethargy in our state government right now. There's far too much hemming and hawing about what we're going to do. We need to get it done. We need true leadership. We need people to step forward and get beyond the partisan games, get beyond the things that are keeping stuff from getting done. Because right now, we are living through a period in which real human lives are being taken every single day. And I see no leadership from Attorney General Ellison and others in government right now. We need true leadership.
And Keith, your answer to the question, what would you like to see changed in our criminal justice system?
I would like to see more criminal prosecutors at the Attorney General's office so we can support the counties who have asked us and trust us with the most serious crimes. I'd like to see more criminal investigators so that we can increase our clearance rate in Minneapolis from homicides. And then I would love to see more action on guns. And I would like to see people who traffic in catalytic converters have some real accountability. There are a range of things we've got to do. I believe we've got to do more in the area of chemical health. So, and also mental health, because so often you see our jails are filled with people who are suffering from mental health and addiction. So there are a number of reforms we need to make our community safer.
Keith, the next question to Keith, and you both will get the same question also. Keith, name one thing you admire about your opponent.
You know, in our last debate, I was genuinely touched by Jim's his very caring comments about his sister. She's a neighbor of mine, and I thought that was very commendable. I'm sure that she's lucky to have a brother like Jim who really does care about her, and that's why I'm working as hard as I can to get negligent gun sales, because I don't want her to ever have to deal with that kind of thing that she suffered through again.
Same question to you, Jim. One thing you admire about your opponent.
I'll give it actually two things. Actually, as somebody who is losing more and more hair every day, is going to be bald in a few years here. I am jealous of Keith's full head of hair through the stresses of public life over these past few years. I will also say, more seriously, Keith, during his time in Congress and otherwise, dealt with a fair amount of bigotry related to his faith. And I believe he handled that really admirably. And it's a hard thing to do, to stand up to bigotry like that, and I admire that.
All right, it's now time for closing statements. You both get 90 seconds. And Keith Ellison, you got the opening statement. So Jim Schultz, why don't you do the first closing statement?
We have far too much status quo in the Attorney General's office right now. It's far too much status quo in our state government. We need true leaders to step up at this historic moment for our state. We need true leaders who will step forward to deal with the extraordinary violence on our streets, the drug problems, the people being shot nearly every day, the people being carjacked, being mugged. We were here in downtown Minneapolis. Of course, it felt here. Just yesterday, there was another shooting in Uptown, another person killed. These are real human lives, real souls. It's important not to get caught up in the stats, but realize that these are real humans with real families, real friends that we're losing every single day. We have to have responsible leadership. We can't allow things like feeding our future ever to happen again. We have to ensure that the Attorney General's office is focused on delivering justice for people who commit serious crime, people who are stealing incredible funds from the state, from federal authorities that was meant for feeding kids. We need true leadership again. This office has been held by one party for 50 years. We need change. Minnesotans are hurting, and we desperately need change with a new vision for the people of Minnesota.
Keith Ellison.
I want to thank Jim Schultz. I want to thank WCCO, and I want to thank our two great hosts tonight. And I want to just say, we've had a very tough 4 years, this pandemic, George Floyd. And I just want to remind everybody that we have a very important choice to make in just about 22 days. I have prosecuted cases. We have received justice for now 26 people who we've convicted, and we're handling 47 cases. We handle the toughest cases that counties trust us with. Jim has never stepped in court before. I'll protect a woman's right to choose. After the Dobbs decision, this really is a critical decision, and the Attorney General has a critical role to play in protecting a woman's right to choose. Look, I protected our wages. I protected, in fact, somebody stopped me the other day and said, hey, look, you returned $7,000 of my paycheck back to me. Now, look, for somebody who's been a hedge fund lawyer, that might not be a lot of money, but it is a lot of money to her. And if you want somebody who will protect your rights, protect your pocketbook, to protect your democracy and your safety, I ask you for your vote. My name is Keith Ellison. I've been your Attorney General, and I'd ask you to return me to the job.
All right. Thank you both for being a part of the evening. Once again, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, his challenger, Republican Jim Schultz. Thank you, gentlemen, both, for coming into the studio, reminding you AARP Minnesota, Minnesota Credit Unions, and the Minnesota Corn Growers Association sponsoring all of the debates here on WCCO. Jason, good night.
Susie, thank you, and thank you both. We appreciate all our sponsors. Henry Lake is next here on News Talk 830 WCCO.